If you have spent any amount of time around cats, you have heard probably one of these. Cats are impossible to train, cats ruin furniture, and they don't care about people. And some people, till date, are very certain that living with cats are bad for your health. But over the few years, through pet sitting and pet consulting, I've had the chance to work with cats who were social, confident, shy, anxious, and everything in between. The strange thing is that these ideas are so common, most of us never stop to even question them. Research over the past few years has continued to show that cats are far more socially flexible and capable of forming meaningful bond than most people assume. Which made me wonder how many things about cats we believe simply because we are looking at it through the wrong lens. So, in this video, let's talk about the biggest myths about cats, starting with the one that surprised me the most, the idea that cats can't be trained. Most people don't realize this, but they're training their cats every single day. They're just not always training the behavior they want. People say cats can't be trained. What they usually mean is that cats don't respond to training the way dogs do, which is true. But that's very different from being untrainable. Here's the shift that changed how I think about cat behavior. Cats are constantly learning, not once a week, not during a training session, all the time. If jumping on a counter leads to something interesting, they're learning. If scratching the sofa feels much better than scratching the post that's tucked away in a corner, they're learning. Every interaction teaches them something. And they're learning. The learning is happening whether you are involved or not. So the real question is, what exactly are we teaching? Let's take scratching for instance. From our perspective, the sofa is destroyed. From a cat's perspective, scratching helps them maintain their claws. It helps them stretch their muscles. It helps them leave a scent markers that makes the space feel familiar. And this behavior makes complete sense. The problem isn't the sofa. The problem isn't the scratching. The problem is that the couch is doing a far better job than the scratching post. And that's where understanding the behavior becomes useful. Once you stop asking, how do I stop this? And start asking, why is this happening? You get very different answers. So, that shift doesn't just help with training, it also explains why so many people believe the next myth, that cats are determined to ruin furniture. Most furniture problems are not really furniture problems, they're communication problems. I know it sounds strange, so let me explain. So, when a cat scratches a sofa, what we see or what most people see is destruction. But what does a cat see? A good scratching post? Think about it. Your couch is sturdy, right? It is tall enough for them to stretch against. It's right in the middle of the home where everyone spends time. And most importantly, it already smells like the family. From a cat's perspective, that's the prime real estate. So when we put a scratching post in a quiet corner of the house and then we wonder why the cat doesn't like it, we are accidentally asking them to choose the wrong option. And cats are far more practical for that. What's more interesting is that when people tell me my cat won't use the scratching post, the solution is often surprisingly very simple. Move it. Try a different texture. Use the horizontal one instead of the vertical one, or vice versa. Move it close to the furniture they're already using to scratch. Because all the cats, they don't like the same stuff. Some prefer sisal, some prefer cardboard, some like to scratch straight, some like to scratch across. The goal is not to stop the behavior. The goal is to give that behavior a better outlet. Once you start looking at things that way, another really common misconception starts to fall apart. Because when cats don't behave the way we expect them to, most people jump to the same conclusion, that cats are aloof, they don't care about us. The reason we think cats are aloof has almost nothing to do with cats. It has more to do with how we expect affection to look like. Most of us grow up seeing dogs as the gold standard for companionship. They greet us at the door, they're very enthusiastic, very expressive, and usually very obvious about how they feel. But cats are different because they are different. And because of that, people assume they are less affectionate. But what if we are measuring them on a very different scale? Apple versus oranges. One thing I've noticed whenever I go for a pet sitting and it's a multi cat household, there are two, three kids in the same house. There's always one introduction that says, okay, this one is very sweet, very social, but she might not be very friendly. She might not interact. For the first few hours and even for the first few days, they maintain their distance. But then something interesting starts to happen. The one kid that supposedly doesn't like people starts appearing in the same room. And then they start following me around when I give them food. They come and sit beside me while I work. This doesn't happen because I have treats or I have some secret technique, and definitely not because I force the interaction. It usually happens because I give cats what they value the most, the freedom to choose. And once I started noticing this pattern, I realized many behavior that we describe as aloofness are just boundaries. A cat sitting nearby instead of your lap, or them walking away after a few minutes of interaction, they're often signs of them deciding how they want to engage. And if cats were as antisocial as we often imagine, some of the things researchers have observed wouldn't make much sense. In places where resources are enough, cats are often seen forming social bonds and grooming each other and even caring for each other's kittens, which, when you think, is very fascinating because it doesn't fit the stereotype most people have in their heads. The picture we are often given is that cats want nothing to do with anyone, but the reality is much more nuanced. Cats can form social strong bonds. They are just very selective about how, when, and with whom they choose to form them. That is why so many people misunderstands them. You're waiting for grand gestures. Meanwhile, the cat is already saying, I trust you enough to sit beside you. I trust you enough to sleep near you. It's affection, just in a different language. And once you start to recognize that language, it's hard to unsee it. And while this myth affects how we understand cats emotionally, the next one is a little more serious because it's a myth that has stopped people from getting a cat altogether. One myth that refuses to go away is that cats are dangerous to have around babies and during pregnancy. And honestly, I understand where the concern comes from. But the risk isn't the cat itself. What most people have heard is about toxoplasmosis, and even then, what often gets missed out that not all the cats carry same level of risk. For example, a cat who spends a lot of time outdoors hunting is generally more likely to be exposed than a cat who is indoors all the time. And even then, the main concern is the litter box. Not cuddling with your cat, not having a cat in the house. The good news is there are simple ways to reduce the risk. If possible, ask someone else to clean the litter. If you need to do it yourself, wear gloves and wash your hands properly afterwards. That's it. You don't have to be scared of your cat. You just have to understand the risk and take a few sensible precautions. But while we're talking about health concerns, there's one myth that I've heard surprisingly very often. In fact, a friend of mine told me that he's allergic to an indie but not Persian. And that brings us to one of the most misunderstanding myths about cats. The idea that the cat hair itself is the problem. One of the most common things I've heard people say is that I'm allergic to cat hair. And sometimes, what if I inhale my cat's hair? And honestly, I heard this so often that I assumed that the cat hair itself is the problem. But here's the interesting part. When people say they are allergic to cat hair, what they're actually reacting to is the tiny protein found in the cat's saliva, the skin flakes, and the dander. The hair is just carrying those stuff around. Which means when someone says they're allergic to cat hair, what they're actually reacting to is what's on the hair than the hair itself. And that can explain why some people are allergic to one cat but not the other. Like the friend of mine who mentioned that he is allergic to indie cats but not the Persians. The reality is much more complicated than that. Things like grooming habits, how much time a cat spends outdoor, how much dander is there in the environment, the ventilation in the home, and even the individual sensitivities can play a role. So it's not always as simple as this breed causes me allergies and this one doesn't. Now let's talk about another concern around cat hair, the idea that accidentally inhaling cat hair might be dangerous. And this one myth feels specifically scary because there's chances of it happening. Meanwhile, our bodies deal with tiny particles from the environment all day, every day. Dust, pollen, tiny fibers from fabrics, and so many other things we don't even notice. And that's one reason why we sneeze, cough, and produce mucus. These all are natural ways body helps trap and remove things that aren't supposed to be inside our airways. So, if you have ever worried about a single cat hair going inside your body, getting stuck in your lungs, and causing serious harm, that's not how generally our body works. For most healthy people, accidentally inhaling cat hair isn't considered dangerous. The bigger concern is usually the allergies and the existing breathing conditions that can be triggered by allergens like dander. This myth sums up what we have seen throughout this video, that the problem isn't the cat itself. It's the stories we have been told around the cats. The more time I spend around cats, the more I realize the behaviors that we describe as aloofness, bad behavior, difficult personalities, these are often just misunderstandings. Today we have talked about cats being trainable, why they scratch furniture, what affection can actually look like, the pregnancy myth, and the concern about cat hair. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's that understanding cats is much more simpler than trying to fix them. Sometimes all it takes is looking at the same behavior from a different angle. If you're thinking about welcoming a cat and feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice online, don't worry, that's what we are going to cover in the next video. Questions that can completely change whether a cat is the right fit for your lifestyle. If you would like a quick reminder of everything we have discussed today, I've put together a free cat reality checklist. It's a simple guide with the key takeaways from this video, plus a few more things I wish more cat parents knew. It's in the description. I'll see you in the next one.